Eloan's hidden crescent mark suddenly burned as Alpha King Dion reached for her across the crowded royal hall. She pulled her sleeve over her wrist before his fingers could touch her, but she was too late. Dion had seen the pain cross her face. His expression changed so quickly that no one else would have noticed. Eloan did. She always noticed him. Again, he asked quietly. Around them, musicians played for the moon festival while nobles moved beneath silver banners, unaware that their king had gone perfectly still. Eloan lowered her hand. It's nothing. Therian's dark eyes hardened. You're lying. The accusation almost made her laugh. Instead, she looked away. 8 years ago, when the same crescent had first appeared beneath her skin, Dion had been the one to tell her there was nothing to fear. She had been 19 then, a lowborn Omega newly brought into royal service, terrified by the strange pull that made her recognize his footsteps before he entered a room and feel his absence like an empty space beneath her ribs. Dion had taken her trembling wrist in his hand and examined the pale mark. She still remembered his exact words. It is not a true mate bond, Eloan. Only a royal protection bond. It will fade. She had believed him because he was the Alpha King, because he knew the ancient laws, and because believing him hurt less than believing fate had bound her to a man who would never acknowledge her. But the mark had not faded. Neither had everything else. She still woke moments before Dion returned from distant journeys. She still felt an inexplicable ache whenever he rode beyond the royal territory. Sometimes she could sense his anger before his counselors knew they had displeased him. For years, Eloan had told herself those things meant nothing. Dion had said so. And Dion had never claimed her. Yet he remembered how she took her tea. He noticed when she skipped breakfast. He had once interrupted a council meeting because someone told him she had fainted in the library, then spent the following week pretending his reaction had been ordinary concern for a member of his household. That was how their life had become something painfully intimate without ever becoming love. Or at least, without ever being called love. Let me see your wrist, Dion said. No, his gaze snapped to hers. Few people in the kingdom refused Alpha King Dion anything. Eloan had learned that she could, occasionally, provided she was willing to endure the silence afterward. Eloan, you told me it would fade. Something moved behind his expression. Not irritation. Fear. It vanished almost immediately, but she had seen it. Her heartbeat quickened. 8 years, Dion. She rarely used his name in public. His eyes flicked toward the surrounding nobles before returning to her. Not here. That is what you always say. She touched the black and silver wolf token hanging at her throat, the one he had given her years ago, while insisting it meant only that she lived beneath his protection. She had once treasured it. Tonight it felt strangely heavy. Not here. Not tonight. Not yet. There is always another reason I should stop asking. Dion stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because there are things you do not understand. The words struck harder than they should have. Eloan studied the man she had spent 8 years trying not to love. Tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in black royal armor beneath a deep crimson cloak, Dion looked exactly as a king should look, untouchable, certain, impossible to challenge. But his hand had tightened at his side. He was afraid. And suddenly Eloan understood that she had been asking herself the wrong question for years. She had wondered why she could not let go of a bond Dion insisted was meaningless. She had wondered whether being an Omega made her too weak, too hopeful, too foolish to accept what he had told her. She had never wondered why the Alpha King seemed just as incapable of letting go. If this is only a protection bond, she whispered, then there is a simple way to end this. Dion stopped breathing for one terrible second. Eloan felt the crescent beneath her sleeve burn again, but this time she did not hide the pain. She held his gaze and finally said the words she had been afraid to speak for 8 years. Release me. Dion did not answer her. That frightened Eloan more than anger would have. The musicians continued playing beyond them, and the moon festival carried on beneath silver banners, as though she had not just asked the most powerful man in the kingdom to sever the invisible thing that had connected them for 8 years. Release me, she repeated. Therian's gaze dropped to the wrist hidden beneath her sleeve. You do not know what you are asking. Then tell me. His jaw tightened. Not here. Elowen almost smiled, but there was no humor left in her. There it is again. She stepped away before he could stop her. Tomorrow morning. Your private council chamber. If you still refuse to explain, I will find someone who will. Dion watched her leave without following, yet she could feel his attention between her shoulder blades until the great doors closed behind her. The next morning, Elowen found him waiting beside a long oak table covered with sealed documents. Without the celebration around them, the distance between King and Omega felt sharper. I will not release the bond, Dion said. Elowen had expected resistance. She had not expected the quiet certainty of it. Why? Severing it could be dangerous. She stared at him. Dangerous. Yes. You told me it was temporary. Dion said nothing. You told me it was not a true mate bond. It is complicated. No. Complicated is explaining why royal taxes changed or why two packs are arguing over a border. This is my life. His eyes flashed, but Elowen continued. If this bond is so insignificant, breaking it should not frighten you. And if breaking it can hurt me, then you knew something you never told me. Dion moved toward her. I am trying to keep you safe. From what? His silence returned. That silence had shaped nearly a decade of her life. She suddenly hated how familiar it felt. I used to think I was the embarrassing part of this, she said softly. I thought the bond stayed because I wanted it to. I thought perhaps I was too weak to let you go. Pain crossed Therian's face. Never say that. Why not? You let me believe it. He stopped. For once, the Alpha King had no command ready. Elowen touched the wolf token at her throat. I cannot keep living inside an answer you refuse to give me. She left him standing beside the untouched documents. Later that afternoon, while crossing the oldest gallery of the palace, Elowen stopped before a faded coronation tapestry she had passed hundreds of times. An ancient Alpha King stood beneath a silver moon, one hand raised toward a ring of embroidered stars. Beside him stood a woman wearing no crown, yet her hand was raised with his. Threads of silver connected them to the same circle. You're studying ghosts. Elowen turned. Queen Mother Runa stood several feet away. Who is she? Elowen asked. Runa followed her gaze. His Luna. Why is she part of the coronation? A faint crease appeared between Runa's brows. In the old rites, the Luna stood with the king when the lunar wards were renewed. Elowen looked back at the tapestry. They do not do that anymore. No, Runa sounded less certain now. They do not. That evening, Runa entered the ceremonial library and opened an old copy of the Moon Codex. Her fingers paused near the center binding. Several stitches were darker than the others, newer than the leather around them. Meanwhile, Elowen sat alone in her chamber with the royal petition form before her. Dion had given her his answer. He would not release her, and he would not tell her why. So she dipped the quill into black ink and wrote her name beneath a formal request for the royal council to examine and dissolve the bond. Across the palace, Dion was reading a border report when a sudden pressure closed around his chest. He knew before any servant arrived. He knew because whatever connected him to Elowen had never been weak, temporary, or meaningless. The chamber door opened. Torin entered carrying a sealed document, his expression grave. Your Majesty, he said. Elowen has petitioned the Royal Council for release. For the first time in 8 years, Dion looked not like a king protecting a secret, but like a man realizing his secret might finally cost him the woman he had lied to keep. By sunrise, Elowen's petition was already in Morkan's hands. The royal seer sat at the far end of the council table with the document before him, his silver ceremonial robes arranged with almost unnatural precision. Dion stood beside the tall windows rather than taking his throne. Elowen noticed that immediately. A king sat when he expected obedience. Dion remained standing when he expected trouble. You are requesting formal dissolution of a royal protection bond, Morkan said. Yes. After 8 years? After 8 years of being told it would disappear on its own. Morkan's eyes shifted briefly toward Dion. The movement was small, but Elowen caught it. Protection bonds sometimes persist, Morkan said. Sometimes. Elowen asked. Under unusual circumstances. Then what circumstances are these? Silence settled over the chamber. The Ion turned from the window. Withdraw the petition, Eloin. She looked at him. No, several counselors lowered their eyes. Morkant remained perfectly still. Your Majesty, he said, if Lady Eloin insists upon examination, royal law permits the council to determine the bond's classification before dissolution. Eloin felt Therian's attention sharpen. What examination? She asked. Morkant folded his hands. A ceremonial test. Nothing more. There will be no test, Therian said. The words carried enough alpha authority to silence the room. Eloin stared at him. Why? Because I said so. Something inside her finally hardened. That answer may work on your council. It does not work on me anymore. Therian's expression changed. For one heartbeat, she saw the man who knew how she took her tea, who could sense when she was unwell from rooms away, who had spent 8 years standing close enough to make leaving impossible and far enough to make hope humiliating. Eloin, he said more quietly. Withdraw it. Did you know? His brow tightened. Know what? That it would never fade. Dion did not answer. She had expected denial. Instead, he gave her silence. The crescent beneath her sleeve seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. You knew something, she whispered. All these years, you knew something. I knew enough to understand that some questions carry consequences. For whom? Therian's gaze held hers. For you. Eloin felt strangely calm. Then I should have been allowed to decide whether I was willing to face them. She turned back to Morkant. I am not withdrawing my petition. Morkant inclined his head, but Eloin saw something colder than courtesy in his eyes. The meeting ended without resolution. Dion left first, his crimson cloak sweeping behind him as Torin followed. Morkant waited until the chamber emptied before entering a narrow adjoining room where Dion stood alone. You cannot allow the examination, Morkant said. Dion faced him. Explain. The crowned bond passages are explicit. If what exists between you and the Omega is stronger than you have admitted, forcing it into recognition during a severance rite could activate it completely. Therian's face lost color. And Eloin? Morkant hesitated just long enough to make the answer feel grave. An Omega was never meant to carry that degree of royal power without preparation. The strain could destroy her. Dion looked toward the closed door through which Eloin had disappeared. 8 years earlier, Morkant had given him the same warning in different words. Dion had been young enough to believe knowledge and wisdom were the same thing. He had chosen silence because silence seemed safer than risking her life. Now that silence had become a prison she was trying to escape. There must be another way, Dion said. There is. Morkant's voice remained measured. Make the council believe there is nothing to examine. Dion understood. His expression darkened. You are asking me to deny her. I am asking you to keep her alive. Elsewhere in the palace, Eloin paused before the ancient coronation tapestry again. The forgotten Luna stood beside her king beneath silver threads connecting them both to the moon. Eloin touched the hidden crescent on her wrist. Dion had not denied knowing more. He had only refused to tell her what he knew. That changed everything. She had spent 8 years believing she was the one unable to release something meaningless. Now she knew the Alpha King feared the truth more than she did. And before the day was over, Dion made the decision that would turn that fear into something neither of them could take back. He ordered the entire royal council assembled to hear his formal declaration about Eloin and the bond. Therian's declaration took less than 10 seconds to destroy what Eloin had spent 8 years trying to understand. The royal council chamber was filled before sunset, its stone galleries crowded with nobles, pack leaders, royal advisors, and witnesses summoned under the king's seal. Eloin stood alone below the raised throne while Dion faced the assembly in black armor and crimson, every inch the ruler who had never allowed uncertainty to show before his court. Morkant stood near the council table. Runa watched from the first gallery, her expression troubled. Torin remained beside the throne. Eloin searched Therian's face for some explanation, some private warning that would make sense of his sudden decision. He gave her none. There has been unnecessary speculation concerning the nature of my connection to Eloin, Dion said. His voice carried through the chamber. Her petition has raised questions that should never have been allowed to become matters of public uncertainty. Eloan's fingers closed around the wolf token at her throat. Dion looked directly at her. For one impossible heartbeat, she saw pain in his eyes. Then the king buried it. Eloan is not my true mate. The chamber seemed to disappear around her. Whispers rose immediately, but Eloan barely heard them. 8 years of waiting collapsed into one sentence. Every night she had awakened knowing he was returning before the palace horns announced him. Every unexplained ache when he traveled beyond the royal territory. Every moment Dion had looked at her as though the rest of the room had ceased to exist. Every time she had wondered whether the bond meant more than he claimed. She had been foolish enough to build hope from contradictions. Now he had given the kingdom an answer. Morkant spoke into the silence. Then there is no true mate bond for this council to examine. Therian's jaw tightened. Correct. Eloan looked at him. And the bond you said could be dangerous to sever? A warning entered his eyes. Eloan. No. You wanted this public. Let it be public. The whispers stopped. She raised her voice only enough for the chamber to hear. You told me for 8 years that what existed between us would fade. Yesterday, you refused to release it because severing it could endanger me. Today you tell everyone it is not real. Which truth am I supposed to live by? Dion stepped down from the throne. This is not the place. Something inside her finally broke free of the habit of waiting. You chose the place. He stopped. Eloan reached for the chain around her neck. The black and silver wolf token rested in her palm, polished smooth from years beneath her fingers. Dion had given it to her after her first winter in the palace. He had fastened it around her neck himself and told her it meant she would always have the king's protection. Once, she had secretly imagined it meant something more. She crossed the chamber and placed the token on the stone ledge before his throne. Dion stared at it. What are you doing? Believing you. His eyes lifted sharply. Eloan. You said I am not your mate. I accept your declaration. The words hurt, but they also gave her something she had not felt in years. Ground beneath her feet. My petition asked for freedom from a bond you insist does not exist. There is nothing left for the council to decide. Dion lowered his voice. Do not make a decision tonight. I have spent 8 years letting you make decisions for me. The crescent beneath her sleeve suddenly burned so fiercely that she caught her breath. Dion moved toward her at once. Eloan raised a hand. Do not. He froze. She saw fear again, naked this time, and for a moment it almost weakened her resolve. Almost. I will leave the palace, she said. The law gives an unclaimed Omega the right to depart royal service. Unless your majesty intends to tell this court that law does not apply to me either. Dion could have stopped her. Everyone in the chamber knew it. One command from the Alpha King could close every gate. But doing so would expose the contradiction he had just created. His silence became permission. Eloan bowed, not as his beloved, not as the woman who had waited for him, but as an Omega acknowledging her king. Then she turned away. Behind her, Morkant slowly released the breath he had been holding. Runa did not. Her eyes had fallen to the wolf token beside the throne, then to Therian's clenched hand. By dawn, Eloan had packed everything she owned into one small traveling case. No jewels. No royal gifts except the simple clothes she had earned herself. When she crossed the palace courtyard, servants who had known her for years watched without speaking. Some looked sorry. Others looked relieved that the strange Omega beside the king had finally learned her place. Eloan kept walking. Dion watched from a high window as she passed through the outer gate. He did not call her back. He had convinced himself this was what protection required. Then Eloan crossed the boundary of the royal grounds. A crushing pressure seized Therian's chest, forcing him to one knee. At the same instant, every wolf in the palace fell unnaturally silent. The silence lasted only seconds, but Dion had never felt anything like it. The wolves were still there. He could sense their bodies throughout the palace, guards in the courtyards, sentries along the walls, servants frozen in corridors, yet the instinctive thread connecting Alpha King to Royal Pack had vanished. Then it returned in a sudden rush. Dion caught the edge of the window ledge and forced himself upright. Your Majesty. Torin entered quickly and stopped when he saw the king's face. The Western Guard reported losing the Alpha command. How long? 3 or 4 seconds. Dion looked beyond the palace gates. Eloan's carriage was already disappearing down the distant road. Every guard, every wolf I have spoken to. Dion closed his eyes. Morkant had told him that acknowledging the bond could endanger Eloan. He had never said her departure could affect the entire royal pack. Another sensation moved through Dion, quieter than the first and infinitely worse. Pain that was not entirely his. Eloan. Several miles away, she pressed a hand against her chest as the carriage slowed beside a stone marker at the edge of royal territory. The crescent beneath her sleeve had darkened from pale silver to a deep, unmistakable gray. She stared at it. 8 years of being told the bond was temporary. 8 years of waiting for a mark that refused to disappear. Now leaving Dion had made it stronger. "Stop the carriage," she said. The driver obeyed. Eloan stepped down and walked back toward the boundary marker. As she approached it, the pressure beneath her ribs eased. She stopped. Then she stepped away again. The ache returned. Her breath caught. Whatever connected her to Dion knew exactly where the royal boundary stood. A simple protection bond should not have known anything at all. Back at the palace, Dion entered the council chamber and found Morkant already waiting. The pack lost my command when she crossed the boundary. For the first time, Morkant's composure shifted. Temporary instability. You knew this could happen? Royal bonds can produce unusual reactions. Dion moved closer. You told me hers was dangerous because recognition could overwhelm her. You told me denying it would keep her safe. And she is alive. That was not my question. Morkant recovered quickly. You are distressed. That is understandable. Dion stared at him. 8 years earlier, those calm answers had sounded like wisdom. Now they sounded like doors closing. Why did the entire pack feel her leave? Morkant offered no immediate answer. Dion turned away. Bring Eloan back, Morkant said. Dion stopped. If separation is causing instability, returning her to the palace is the safest course until we understand it. That was precisely what Dion would have done yesterday. Send riders. Close the road. Tell himself that keeping her near him was protection. He imagined Eloan standing before the council, saying she had spent 8 years letting him make decisions for her. No, Morkant's eyes narrowed. Your Majesty? No one follows her. No one orders her back. The kingdom may be at risk. Then I will discover why. That night, another disturbance moved through the palace. One of the lunar wardstones surrounding the northern wall dimmed for nearly a minute. Dion stood before it with Runa and Torin while the silver markings slowly returned. Runa looked toward her son. This began when Eloan left. I know. And you still believe she is not connected to the crown? Dion said nothing. Runa studied him, and something painful entered her face. What have you done, Dion? He could not answer without admitting everything. Not yet. Instead, he returned to his private chamber and found the black and silver wolf token exactly where he had placed it after Eloan returned it. He closed his hand around it. He had spent 8 years believing that the worst thing he could do was tell Eloan the truth. Now he was beginning to understand that his silence might have been the danger all along. Before midnight, Dion descended alone beneath the palace to the sealed royal archive. Kings were discouraged from entering without the royal seer because the oldest laws were considered sacred records requiring ceremonial interpretation. For the first time, Dion wondered who had benefited from that rule. He unlocked the iron door and carried the Moon Codex to a stone table. The volume was older than his dynasty's current palace, its leather worn smooth by generations of hands. Dion turned slowly through the crown bond section. The warning Morkant had shown him 8 years earlier was still there. His eyes moved across the familiar lines, then stopped. The numbering jumped from page 246 to page 249. Dion checked again. 2 pages were missing. He examined the binding. Several stitches were darker than the rest. Newer. Deliberate. Dion stood motionless beneath the archive lamps as the first terrible possibility took shape. Perhaps Eloan had not been the only person living inside a lie. Dion remained in the archive until the lamps burned low, staring at the gap where 2 pages should have been. Missing parchment could have been accident. New stitching could not. By morning, the Moon Codex lay beside 3 older ceremonial records on his private table, each open to passages concerning royal bonds, coronations, and the lunar wards. The records contradicted one another in small ways, but one contradiction refused to disappear. In the oldest accounts, the king had never renewed the wards alone. His Luna had stood beside him. Dion summoned Runa before anyone else. His mother entered carrying the dignity of a former queen, but her expression changed when she saw the books. "Do you remember the ward ceremony from your childhood?" he asked. "Of course." "Who performed it?" Runa frowned. "Your father." Then she hesitated. "And my mother stood with him." Dion turned the oldest record toward her. An illustration showed exactly what Aloan had noticed in the tapestry: king and Luna beneath the same circle of silver light. "The current law says the crown alone carries the royal bond into the wards." Runa slowly sat down. That was not always how the ceremony was performed. "When did it change?" "I do not know." Dion looked at the missing pages. "Neither do I." He found Morkant before noon. The royal seer stood in the ceremonial library, where sunlight fell across shelves of law and prophecy. Dion placed the Moon Codex on the table between them. 2 pages are gone. Morkant glanced down. Ancient books deteriorate. The binding was repaired after the pages disappeared. Then someone preserved what remained. Dion opened another record. "Why does this show the Luna participating in the ward rite?" "Traditions evolve." "Why?" "Your Majesty, you are searching for certainty in documents written centuries apart." Therian's voice lowered. "I am searching for the reason I spent 8 years lying to Aloan, because you told me the truth could kill her." Morkant became very still. "I told you what the law required. You told me acknowledgement could overwhelm her. You told me concealment was safer. And you chose concealment." The words landed exactly where Morkant intended. Dion did not deny them. "Yes," he said. "I did." For the first time, Morkant seemed unsettled by the answer. Dion stepped closer. "If you deceived me, that does not erase what I did to her. But it does mean I will discover why." He left before Morkant could answer. That was the moment Morkant understood that fear would no longer control the king. So he chose another weapon. By evening, messengers were riding toward the village where Aloan had taken a room at a small inn beyond the royal boundary. She was sitting beside the window when Torin arrived, not with soldiers, but alone. The crescent on her wrist remained dark. "The king sent you?" she asked. "No. He specifically ordered that no one compel you to return." That surprised her more than she wanted it to. Torin placed a sealed summons on the table. "This came from the royal council." Aloan broke the seal. Her face slowly lost color. "The council was ordering her back to answer an accusation of unlawful bond manipulation against the Alpha King. They think I enchanted him?" "Morkant claims the disturbances began because your bond interfered with royal authority." Aloan looked toward the distant palace towers. "Dion knows that is not true." "He does." "Then why is there a hearing?" "Because the accusation is now part of public record. If the king simply destroys it, Morkant will say that proves the influence." Aloan folded the summons carefully. The cruelty of it was almost elegant. Therian's years of secrecy had created exactly the evidence Morkant needed. The king had protected an Omega without claiming her, refused to release her, publicly denied her, and then lost control of the royal pack when she left. To anyone outside the truth, it looked suspicious. The next morning, Dion met Aloan at the palace gates. He did not reach for her. "I can move you somewhere beyond the council's authority until I prove what happened," he said. Aloan stared at him. "Hide me again? Protect you? You still think those are the same thing?" Dion fell silent. "I spent 8 years living inside whatever truth you decided I could bear," she said. "Morkant wants everyone to believe I manipulated you. If I disappear now, he wins. Then what do you want?" It was such a simple question, yet Aloan realized he had almost never asked it. She uncovered the dark crescent on her wrist. "I want the truth where everyone can hear it." Therian's expression changed as he understood what she meant. The oldest law still allowed one proceeding that neither king nor council could privately control once invoked by an accused party. A moon tribunal. Aloan held his gaze. No more private explanations. No more sealed rooms. No more deciding what I am allowed to know. Dion looked at the woman his silence had already cost him once. This time, he did not tell her no. The Moon Tribunal had not been invoked against a royal accusation in more than a generation, and by noon the Great Hall was filled with witnesses. Aloan stood beneath the carved silver moon at the center of the chamber while nobles, pack leaders, and council members watched from rising galleries. Morkant waited beside the ceremonial table with the confidence of a man who still believed the law belonged to him. Therion entered last. His black armor caught the light, his crimson cloak trailing behind him, but he did not ascend the throne. Instead, he removed the royal sword from his side and placed it before Torin. Then he removed the crown seal from his hand. Murmurs spread through the hall. Your Majesty, Morkant said carefully, there is no requirement for you to surrender royal privilege. That is why I am doing it. Dion looked toward the assembled council. Until this tribunal ends, no alpha command of mine will interfere with testimony, evidence, or judgment. Morkant's expression tightened. Aloan felt something inside her shift, not toward forgiveness, but toward recognition. Dion had finally been given an opportunity to control the truth, and he had refused it. The tribunal began with Morkant's accusation. He described the royal pack losing Therion's command when Aloan crossed the boundary. He spoke of the failing wardstone and Therion's unusual protection of an unclaimed Omega. Each fact was true. Together, they created a lie. The king's behavior changed around her, Morkant said. The disturbances intensified when she departed. We must consider whether an untrained Omega bond influenced the crown. Aloan listened without lowering her eyes. When her turn came, she uncovered the dark crescent on her wrist. Then examine everything, she said. Not only what happened when I left. Examine why this mark appeared 8 years ago. Examine why I was told it would fade. Examine why the king refused to sever something he publicly claimed was not real. The hall went silent. Dion looked at her. Aloan. This time his voice held no command. Only grief. A recess was called while the ceremonial witnesses prepared the bond records. Dion found Aloan alone in the narrow moon chamber behind the hall. He stopped several feet away. Before they continue, there is something you must hear from me. Aloan's heart began to pound. Another warning? The truth. She waited. Dion seemed to struggle against 8 years of practiced silence. The bond was never temporary. Aloan did not move. What? I knew from the beginning that it was stronger than I told you. His voice roughened. I believed it was a true crown bond. For one suspended moment, the words sounded like everything she had once wanted. Then their meaning settled into place. 8 years. 8 years of shame. 8 years of wondering why she could not stop loving him. You knew. Yes. When you told me it would fade? Yes. Her eyes filled, but she refused to look away. When I asked whether something was wrong with me? Therion's face tightened. Yes. When you watched me apologize for wanting too much? He had no defense left. Yes. Aloan turned away from him. The revelation did not feel like being chosen. It felt like discovering the floor beneath her memories had never been solid. Why? She whispered. Morkant showed me the crown bond law. He told me acknowledgement could activate the bond completely, and that the royal power could overwhelm you. I believed claiming you might kill you. Aloan faced him again. So you decided I should never know. I thought keeping you alive mattered more. More than what? Dion said nothing. More than my right to understand my own life? Her voice broke despite her effort to steady it. You let me believe I was foolish because you were afraid of what I might choose if you told me the truth. I was afraid of losing you. And you lost me anyway. Therion closed his eyes. He did not reach for her. I know. Aloan wiped the tears from her cheek. Do not ask me to forgive you because you loved me. I will not. Love does not make 8 years disappear. I know that too. A bell sounded from the tribunal hall. The recess was ending. Dion stepped aside, leaving the doorway open for her. Whatever they discover, he said, you will hear it before I do. I swear it. Eloin walked past him. For the first time, Dion followed rather than leading. As they returned to the hall, Runa was not in her seat. She had left the tribunal after hearing Eloin mention the first appearance of the mark. A memory from decades earlier had finally returned clearly enough to frighten her. She hurried through the oldest wing of the palace to a locked room containing the possessions of Therian's grandmother, the last queen who had performed the ancient ward rite. At the bottom of a cedar chest lay a narrow silver box sealed with the former queen's crest. Runa opened it with trembling hands. Inside rested ceremonial letters, an old lunar seal, and 2 folded sheets of parchment. She recognized the numbering immediately. 247. 248. Runa stared at the missing pages of the Moon Codex, then at a handwritten passage preserved beneath them. The old law did not say what Dion had been taught. It said almost the opposite. Runa closed the box and carried it toward the tribunal, knowing that when those pages were read aloud, the kingdom would finally learn what had truly been dangerous all along. Runa entered the tribunal carrying the 2 pages that had shaped 8 years of silence. The room changed before she spoke. Morkan saw the silver box in her hands, and for the first time since the proceedings began, his composure failed. Dion noticed. So did Eloin. Runa placed the box on the ceremonial table and unfolded the missing pages beside the current Moon Codex. The numbering matched perfectly. Page 247. Page 248. Even the torn edges aligned with the narrow remnants still caught beneath the newer binding thread. These belonged to the previous queen, Runa said. They were preserved with her ceremonial records. Morkan stepped forward. Old copies cannot automatically be considered authoritative. Then perhaps, Dion said, you should explain why these pages are missing from the authoritative copy. Morkan fell silent. Runa began to read. The ancient law described a crowned mate bond not as a privilege granted by an alpha king, but as a bond requiring 2 informed souls. Neither royal command nor instinct alone could complete it. Both mates had to know the bond's true nature and accept it freely. Eloin stared at the dark crescent on her wrist. Then Runa reached the passage that changed everything. A crown bond kept deliberately unacknowledged did not disappear. Suppression divided what the bond was attempting to join. Over time, the fracture could spread beyond the mated pair into the royal pack and the lunar wards tied to the crown. Dion went completely still. Eloin remembered every unexplained ache when he traveled. Dion collapsing when she crossed the boundary. The wolves falling silent. The dimming ward stone. The bond had never been destroying her because it was too powerful to acknowledge. It had been hurting them because it was being denied. Runa laid the parchment down. The current codex preserves the warning about danger, but the lines explaining the cause are gone. Every face turned toward Morkan. Why? Dion asked. Morkan's answer came slowly. Because the old law was dangerous to the crown. To the crown, Runa repeated. To stability, Morkan said. A crowned Luna with equal authority over the bond could influence succession, ward rights, and royal decisions. 12 years ago, the council had barely survived a succession crisis. The kingdom needed one unquestioned center of power. Eloin understood then. This had begun before Dion ever found her. Morkan had not invented their bond. He had changed the knowledge surrounding it so that future kings would fear sharing its authority. You removed the pages, Dion said. I preserved the monarchy. You taught me that acknowledging my mate could kill her. Morkan looked directly at him. And you believed me. The words struck the chamber like a challenge. Dion could have hidden behind what had been done to him. Eloin saw the possibility clearly. He had been young. He had trusted the royal seer. He had acted from fear for her life. The court would have accepted those excuses because kings were rarely required to carry the same weight as everyone else. Dion looked at Eloin instead. Yes, he said. I believed him. He stepped away from the throne. Morkan lied to me once. His voice carried through the silent hall. I lied to Eloin for 8 years. Morkan's expression changed. Dion continued. What he did explains why I was afraid. It does not excuse what I chose to do with that fear. Eloin's throat tightened. I knew she was my mate. I told her she was not. I watched her question herself, because telling the truth meant accepting a risk I could not control. I called that protection. His eyes remained on hers. It was also a denial of her right to choose. No one moved. Dion ordered Morkant removed from royal office pending lawful judgment, then suspended every crown statute permitting concealed, coerced, or involuntary mate claims until the original laws could be reviewed. Runa formally entered the recovered pages into the royal record. Finally, the tribunal's elder examiner approached Eloin. Your wrist. Eloin uncovered it. Moonlight from the high ceremonial window touched the dark crescent. Slowly, silver returned along its edges. The examiner bowed his head. An incomplete crown mate mark. A murmur swept through the galleries. Incomplete? Eloin asked. Not false, he said. Unfinished. The law is clear now. It cannot become whole through the king's command. Both must know what it is. Both must choose it. Eloin looked at Dion. 8 years ago, those words would have felt like the ending she had prayed for. She was his true mate. She had never imagined the connection. She had never been foolish for feeling it. But truth did not erase what the lie had done. Dion seemed to understand. He crossed to the throne and picked up the black and silver wolf token she had returned. The court watched, expecting him to place it around her neck and publicly claim his Luna. Instead, Dion stopped several feet away. He closed his hand around the token and faced the kingdom. The bond is real, he said. But it does not give me ownership of her. Then he looked at Eloin, and the most powerful alpha in the kingdom did the one thing no one expected. You are free. Eloin had dreamed of hearing those words for years, but freedom did not feel the way she had imagined. There was no sudden joy, no clean ending to the ache inside her. There was only silence in the tribunal hall and Dion standing several feet away with the wolf token closed in his hand, making no attempt to cross the distance between them. You may leave the palace, he said. You may leave royal territory. You may leave the kingdom if that is what you choose. No guard will follow you. No law will compel you to return. And no one, including me, will call you Luna unless you decide that name belongs to you. Eloin searched his face. And the bond. I will endure whatever distance costs me. His voice remained steady, though she could see what the words required of him. I should have trusted you with the truth 8 years ago. I cannot repair that by making another decision for you now. Eloin's eyes burned. Part of her still loved him. That was what made leaving necessary. I do not know whether I can forgive you. Dion nodded once. Then I will not ask you to. She left the palace the next morning. This time no carriage stopped at the royal boundary. No messenger came after her. The crescent on her wrist ached when she traveled farther away, but knowing what it was changed the pain. It was no longer proof that something was wrong with her. Eloin spent the following months in a quiet northern town where almost no one knew her as the Omega who had stood beside a king. She learned what mornings felt like when she was not waiting to sense Dion somewhere beyond a palace wall. She made decisions too small for history to remember and precious precisely because they were hers. Meanwhile, Dion kept the promise he had made without asking her to witness it. The altered mate statutes were abolished. No alpha under crown law could conceal the legal nature of a recognized bond from the other person. No mate claim could be completed without informed consent. The lunar ward rights were restored to their older form, recognizing a crowned pair as partners rather than ruler and possession. Morkant faced judgment under the laws he had manipulated, and the recovered pages of the Moon Codex were placed where anyone permitted to study royal law could see them. Dion never sent Eloin a plea to return. Runa wrote twice, but only about the reforms. Torin delivered no secret messages. For the first time since Eloin had known the Alpha King, he allowed his actions to exist without demanding that they produce the outcome he wanted. When the next moon ceremony arrived, the palace prepared for the renewal of the lunar wards. Dion stood alone beneath the ancient coronation tapestry. The empty place beside the king in the ceremony no longer felt like something he had the right to fill. Then the great doors opened. Eloin entered wearing a simple sage-green dress, her long golden brown hair falling freely over her shoulders. The hall slowly became silent. Dion did not move. Neither did Eloan at first. Months apart had not erased what happened between them. It had done something more important. It had allowed her to discover that she could survive without being chosen by him. Only then could choosing him mean anything. She walked toward the throne. Dion reached inside his cloak and brought out the black and silver wolf token. He did not place it around her neck. He simply opened his palm. "This belonged to you only because I said it meant my protection," he said quietly. "If you take it now, it will mean whatever you choose." Eloan looked down at the token that had once represented every unanswered question between them. Then she looked at the man holding it. "I am not returning because fate says I belong to you. I know. And being your mate does not erase what happened. I know. If I stand beside you, I stand there as your equal in every choice that concerns this bond." Therian's eyes shone with an emotion he did not hide. "Yes." Eloan took the token from his palm herself. The crescent on her wrist warmed. Silver light moved gently along the incomplete curve until, for the first time in 8 years, the mark became whole. A quiet reaction passed through the royal wolves gathered in the hall, not fear or submission, but recognition. Dion still did not touch her. He waited. Eloan understood what he was waiting for. Not destiny. Not law. Her. She stepped forward and offered him her hand. Only then did Dion take it. Around them, the lunar wards brightened across the palace walls, steady and clear. The royal wolves bowed to their crown Luna, but Eloan no longer needed their recognition to understand her worth. She had never been foolish for loving Dion. She had never been lesser because he refused to name what she was. And Dion had finally learned that loving someone did not give even a king the right to choose their life for them. For years, fate had connected them. In the end, truth gave them something fate never could: the freedom to choose each other.